HP's latest OMEN 15 gaming laptop fixes everything wrong with last year's model, while featuring a more stylish design and VR-ready graphics power. The last OMEN notebook tried to downplay its gaming sensibility with a somewhat boring look, but with the new model, HP made a complete turnaround. The OMEN 15 has a more aggressive, fighter jet-like design that emphasizes sharp lines and angles instead of rounded corners. You can tell it's a gaming machine just by looking at it, which is exactly what players want. The OMEN 15's case is still made of plastic, but it's mostly sturdy. There's a bit of flex behind the OMEN logo in the display though, which makes me wonder how safe it would be crammed into a stuffed laptop bag. At 5.68 pounds, it's also on the lighter side for full-fledged gaming laptops. You definitely won't mistake the OMEN 15 for an ultra-portable, but it's still pretty easy to carry around. It also implements NVIDIA's Max-Q design philosophy, which is one reason why it's so portable. But the OMEN 15 doesn't take Max-Q as far as Asus's Zephyrus laptop, which comes in under 5 pounds and features more powerful hardware. To give it a bit of a premium feel, HP also draped a layer of aluminum around the keyboard and trackpad, both of which are also significantly better than last year. The keyboard itself feels great to type on, with a decent amount of key travel, and it's also very responsive for games. I felt just as capable maneuvering through Overwatch matches as I do on my desktop keyboard. Sure, it's not mechanical, but you have to step up to far more expensive gaming laptops like HP's huge OMEN X for that. There's a full number pad on the right side of the keyboard, as well as a crimson backlight for when you're gaming in the dark. The OMEN 15's touchpad is smooth and accurate for all of your productivity needs, but of course you'll need a decent mouse for most games. I really appreciated the solid touchpad because it's something plenty of Windows machines tend to skip on, especially with gaming laptops. The OMEN 15's 15.6-inch display is available in 4K or 1080p with a fast 120Hz refresh rate. You can also choose from G-Sync compatible screens for NVIDIA GPUs and FreeSync displays for AMDs. I tested the 4K G-Sync version, which was bright, colorful, and responsive enough for fast-paced games. The screen was also great for movies and TV shows, but that's less of an achievement these days. I didn't see much of a point in having such a high resolution though, since the OMEN isn't powerful enough to play games smoothly in 4K. Most gamers would be better off with the 1080p screen, which will let you see up to 120 frames per second. The OMEN 15 speakers were also impressive. They delivered a surprising amount of volume and detail for laptop speakers. Since they sit towards the front of the laptop, it's almost as if the sound is coming towards you, which makes for much more natural sounding audio. Obviously, it's no match for a decent set of gaming headphones, but it's nice to have some solid built-in sound. The OMEN 15 is powered by Intel's i7-7700HQ CPU and your choice of NVIDIA's GTX 1050, 1050 Ti, or 1060 GPUs. The lowest end model features AMD's Radeon RX 550 if you're aiming to save a few bucks. It also packs in between 8GB and 16GB of RAM, and you can choose between SSD options and larger 2.5-inch hard drives for storing all of your games. Overall, it has much more horsepower than last year's OMEN. If you want to dabble in VR though, you'll have to step up to the GTX 1060 version to run the Oculus Rift and HTC Vive. As for ports, the OMEN 15 includes 3 USB 3.0 connections, a USB-C port with optional Thunderbolt connectivity, an SD card reader, and an Ethernet jack. And for video output, it includes full-size HDMI and mini DisplayPort connections. You can also remove the bottom of the laptop to swap out its SSD, hard drive, and RAM. At least you can in theory. Some of the tiny screws just wouldn't budge for me, and they ended up getting stripped when I tried to open the case. Even though it's not nearly as beefy as the Asus Zephyrus, the OMEN 15 still packs in enough power to reach a solid 60 frames per second in most modern games running in 1080p. I clocked in around 120 frames per second in Overwatch on high graphical settings, and between 60 and 70 in The Witcher 3 and Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. As I mentioned before though, the OMEN 15 isn't ideal for 4K gaming. The Witcher 3 ran at just 20 frames per second at that resolution with medium graphics settings. Unfortunately, the OMEN's monitor doesn't support 1440p, which is my ideal gaming resolution between 1080p and 4K. Honestly though, with a display this size, it'd be tough to tell the difference between that and 1080p. The important thing about the OMEN 15? Everything I threw at it looked and played great as long as I stuck with 1080p. HP also did a great job of minimizing heat. The OMEN's GPU reached around 72 Celsius at full load in my air-conditioned office, while the CPU hovered around 80 Celsius. While I wouldn't recommend using it on your lap while you're gaming, the OMEN never got too hot to touch either. Partially, the sensible temperatures are due to a much more efficient fan design, which HP claims pushes around 20% more airflow at full speed. The company also implemented the Max-Q version of NVIDIA's GTX 1060, which is clocked a bit slower than the standard version, but is much more power efficient because of that. The GTX 1060 version of the OMEN 15 fits in 3 heat pipes, compared to just 2 from last year's model. When playing a demanding game, the laptop can get noticeably loud, but that's not a huge issue if you're wearing headphones. Unfortunately, the OMEN 15 is a disappointment when it comes to battery life. In our test, which involves looping in HD video, it lasted only 2.5 hours. The HP OMEN 15 starts at $1,000 with AMD's Radeon RX 550, but you'll have to shell out $1,300 if you want NVIDIA's GTX 1050. The highest end version with the GTX 1060, meanwhile, goes for around $1,659. The price can get higher depending on how much storage you stuff in. Mostly, HP is targeting Dell's Alienware 15 lineup, which begins at $1,200. Those machines weigh a few pounds more, and they don't have the benefit of a Max-Q design, but they also have room to fit in more powerful GPUs like NVIDIA's GTX 1070 and 1080. There's also Dell's Inspiron 7000, which starts at $1,000, but has a much more subdued design. And if money is no object, and you just want to see how far NVIDIA's Max-Q design can go, check out Asus's ROG Zephyrus. Just be prepared to shell out at least $2,300 for the privilege of having the thinnest gaming laptop around. The best thing about the OMEN 15, it's clear that HP learned from its mistakes. This year's model looks great, brings in more power, and actually has a good keyboard. While hardcore gamers might want to hold out for the even more powerful OMEN X, the OMEN 15 should satisfy everyone else.